Let's talk about the difference between earning interest and paying interest. So if you've seen in other videos, when we talk about banks, they have this incredible business model of utilizing OPM, or other people's money. And what they do is, we talked about this in previous videos, they pull together everybody's money into these very, very large sums. They scoop them all up and they buy assets with them. And typically those assets are what are called BOLIs, or bank-owned life insurance policies. They also do things like lend those out. So they might take your money, it's called fractional banking, and a portion of it has to stay in reserves, but the rest of it they can go and borrow from you and lend it out to another one of their clients and make a spread on it. So most people go, okay, they're either making a spread between what they are paying us back and what they are giving someone else, or they are looking at something like an investment that they make into a life insurance policy or another piece of real estate or something. And let's just say that those policies, which they typically do, return a minimum of, let's call it 4% guaranteed. So they are getting 4% off of their investment, and that investment's coming right back to them. Now, what do they do in turn? Well, they return to us, the customer, anywhere from, call it 0.5% to 1% if we're lucky. Right? So the average person might look at that and go, okay, well, the difference between 1% and 4%, the bank's making a 3% return, right? 3% spread or arbitrage between those two numbers. But what you're missing is it's not actually 3%, it's actually 300%. And why is that? Well, it's because it was never their money to start with. They were taking someone else's money, so they had zero invested, purchasing an asset with somebody else's money, making a full 400% return on that money, and only having to pay back a small percentage to their customers. So it's an incredible business model, and we end up funding so many institutions like banks in this capacity. We are giving up all this compounding growth that could happen out there. So the reason I bring this up is because when we talk about becoming our own bank or utilizing these strategies inside of a life insurance policy for ourselves, we can eliminate the bank from being the one who's getting rich off of us and have ourselves begin to build that wealth. So what this looks like is, instead of it being a bank taking things over, we would look at this and say, okay, well, can't we create the insurance policy ourselves and fund it with our own cash? Let's say we have $100,000 in a policy. Now something comes up. Maybe it's an investment we want to make in a piece of real estate. Maybe it's a vehicle that we want to finance. Maybe it is a business transaction that we want to try to finance. Instead of us saying, okay, well, we would like to withdraw the money, if we think about it like regular banks, if I wanted to buy something for $25,000, I would just withdraw it out at $25K. And what does that do? Well, it completely obliterates that compounding growth. Remember, this money in here is growing at a rate of 4 to 6% guaranteed, right? So we're getting that compounding growth each and every year on our big nest egg here. So what's the worst thing that we can do? Well, if we withdraw it, we just drop this down to $75,000, completely affecting that compounding growth. So instead, what like the banks do, we could use somebody else's money. And in this case, because it's an insurance policy, the insurance company, remember, by you funding this, the insurance company is agreeing that you give them cash, and in return, they guarantee that they're going to pay a death benefit at some point in the future when you pass away. Now, that's going to be next year. That's going to be 50 years from now, right? It doesn't matter when you pass away. They know that they owe you a death benefit. That's why you're paying money into it. A portion's going to that expense of buying that benefit. So they realize that, and they say, you know what? Instead of you withdrawing and affecting the compounding growth on that policy, what if you took a loan from us? Because we know you have to pay you in the future. We'll give you any amount up to the amount you have in your policy because we know that you're good for it, right? So then you can actually take a loan out from the insurance company of any amount up to this, usually about 90% of that. So if we take a loan from the insurance company, now we can grab that same amount of cash out and make a spread on it. We can make an investment. Maybe we want to buy that piece of real estate. And maybe that piece of real estate we know is going to give us a positive spread of, let's call it 12%. That's going to be our return, right? And we know that we are making 4% at least as a minimum inside this policy. Now, because it's a loan, we aren't actually decreasing or withdrawing the money from that policy, which means that this entire $100,000 continues to compound at that 4% rate. So what are we doing? We're really building our cash to grow in two places at once. Now, just to clarify, there is an expense for taking this loan out, and the insurance companies usually charge us 4 to 6% simple interest on that, right? Not compound interest. Very important distinction there. Remember, simple means we're only paying that interest on the total principal and not any gains that happen on it, right? So we're getting paid compound interest on our big lump sum, and we're paying back simple interest. This is money. There's an expense to using that, which is well aware, just like you would do with anything else, but you're making so much because this is a small amount. Anything on top is just going to be gravy, right? So this is how we start thinking about really earning interest rather than letting someone else pay into and making somebody else wealthy. So it's a totally different mindset shift, but it's important to think about the real numbers behind this. It's not just the spread between a 5% gain over here and a 4% that we have to pay back. You have to think about the terms and the structure here. So I hope that's not too confusing. Feel free to reach out with questions, but I want you to start thinking about you, your money, and the empire that you're building as this privatized bank that you can take advantage of.